Welcome, everyone, and thank you for your patience. We are just a couple of minutes late. My name is Erin Trainer, and I am the Deputy Mayor. Thank you so much for joining us as we discuss the proposed 2025 budget and rate increases for the electrical, water, and sewer utilities. This presentation is being recorded and will be posted on the District of Summerland's YouTube page for future viewing. I will start by saying that council and staff recognize it has been a very difficult year for many of you, including myself, with increasing financial pressures. As a result, the utility budget has been frustrating at times for all of us as we try to balance what needs to be done and what we can afford. That being said, budgeting, planning, and taking care of our utilities is a core responsibility and requires honest, thoughtful, and tough decisions that also take into account our current and future ratepayers. Staff started the budget process several weeks ago, refining and cutting where they could. And then late last month, council reviewed those numbers. We also postponed projects, debated others, and finally settled on an overall increase of 6.51%. A place we believe is as reasonable as possible. This year, like all municipalities, we're dealing with inflation that has resulted in higher costs for construction, services, and materials, in addition to our yearly contractual increases. Specifically, in the electrical utility, we are absorbing an increase in the cost of wholesale power from Fortis. In the water utility, we're facing an increase in the cost of chemicals for our water treatment. And for those who are connected to sewer in that utility, we are taking on our first year of debt payments for a new primary clarifier for our wastewater treatment plant. This is a regulatory requirement. Council has also allocated a small percentage of funds into our reserves for each utility. This will allow us to fund future projects with less debt borrowing. Municipal utilities are governed by many regulatory requirements, so it is challenging for council to make cuts. Delivering electricity, providing safe and reliable drinking water, and maintaining a wastewater treatment plant are expensive but necessary costs. Overall, our utilities are in good shape, and we have a dedicated and skilled team to deliver our electrical, water, and sewer systems. With proper care and planning, Council wants to ensure that we continue to deliver services that you expect. Please listen to the following presentation by our Director of Finance, who will go into more background and detail on the budget. You are also encouraged to submit any questions or feedback that you have to budget@summerland.ca, and you have until December 5th. Council will consider all of your feedback before our final debate on utility rates on December 17th. Thank you again for joining us, and over to you now, David.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Trainer. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the District of Summerland's 2025 Utility Budget and Rates Virtual Open House. As Deputy Mayor noted, my name is David Svetlichny, and I'm the Director of Finance here at the District of Summerland. My job over the next 35 to 45 minutes is to guide you through 3 months of utility budget discussions and meetings and highlight how those meetings have shaped the proposed 2025 utility budgets, as well as the proposed 2025 utility rate increases. Now, before we get started, I wanted to note a few housekeeping items. Firstly, as this is a virtual presentation, all participants are asked to stay muted during the presentation. All participants, once the presentation is finished, I'll be opening up the floor to anyone wishing to ask questions. Now, secondly, I'd ask that if anyone does have a question, please do not use the chat function in the Zoom, as it's not being monitored. Should any of you have questions, again, please hold them until the end of our presentation, at which point I'll open the floor to everyone. Alternatively, as the Deputy Mayor noted, once I get to the end of the presentation, we'll provide that email for you once again for anyone wishing to submit their questions. So with that said, Today's presentation will cover three main topics: asset management, the financial budgets themselves, and we'll finish off with the proposed 2025 utility rate increases and the overall impact they have on a typical home. Now, prior to diving into our agenda, I wanted to take a moment to highlight some of the factors that need to be considered when putting together a financial plan. For starters, is it a new or an existing project? If it's new, does it require additional resources? Deputy Mayor noted provincial and federal regulatory requirements often force municipalities into additional expenses, be it from a health and safety perspective or additional testing, and oftentimes with little to no input from the municipality itself. When reviewing potential projects, we also need to look at the risks associated with the project, as well as the potential consequences of not moving forward with that project. Projects with high risks and high consequences are the first to move forward in the budgeting process. Levels of service factor greatly into financial planning process. Previous year's budgets normally set the benchmark for where a service level is set. Throughout the course of a year, we receive many requests from residents to increase levels of service, be that mowing fields more, sweeping streets more than once, etc. Additionally, new development can also lead to level of service changes. The budgeting process takes these factors into consideration. Now, one thing to note when discussing level of service is that very rarely do residents want to see their service levels reduced. However, when looking at increases to these service levels, the increases do require additional charges to residents, or where possible, we look at operational efficiencies to try to absorb those increases. Funding options definitely affect the financial plan. How will we fund the increased level of service, new project, or regulatory requirement? Should it come from actual users of the service? If it benefits the entire community, should it be funded through taxation? Are grants available? Do we need to borrow money? There are many things to consider and many questions to answer in this area. Now, the final factor to note is one we're all dealing with on a daily basis: inflation and market conditions. We continue to see high demands for goods, which is causing material shortages and price escalations. Couple this with high interest rates, and these factors have significantly impacted the proposed budget you see in front of you today. All six of these factors, and there are a lot more, along with council's strategic priorities, drive the final financial plan and ultimately the rates Summerland residents are charged. Now, assets are the core of our three utilities. Without functioning assets, the district cannot provide the vital services that each utility delivers. So the next three slides will provide some overall context into the amount of assets needed to provide the utility services to the residents of Summerland. As on this slide, within our electrical utility, we have 2 substations, 9 feeders, 3,700 poles, 1,500 transformers, 280 kilometers of overhead conductor, 60 kilometers of underground cable, and 1,350 streetlights. And these are approximate numbers. In the sewer utility, we have 80 kilometers of collection pipe, 3,400 sanitary sewer services, wastewater treatment plant, and 8 lift stations. And on the water side, 220 kilometers of water mains, 6,000 water services, 440 hydrants, 12 dams, 1 water treatment plant, 13 PRV stations, 13 pump stations, and I can't see the last one, 4 in-ground storage tanks. So over the past few years, Council has identified the importance and the need of increasing capital reserves that historically were extremely minimal. As a result of Council's thoughtfulness and commitment, reserve levels have steadily begun to increase. In contrast, the district's estimated 2019 replacement cost of all of our utility infrastructure was over $360 million. Now, this was based on the asset management work that was completed in 2019. So that was 5 years ago. At that time, it was also estimated that our utility deficit was projected to be over $86.5 million. Now, considering in recent inflationary pressures and global market conditions, it's fair to say that these amounts have increased substantially since the work was completed back in 2019. And although positive strides have been made over the years to increase utility reserves, significant investment is still required to support the long-term needs of the community, especially as we continue to see escalating construction costs. So as we can see on the screen here, Council's commitment back in 2020 was to annually increase sewer fees by 3.5% and water fees 5% on an annual basis. And then on the electrical utility side, there was no annual commitment per se. However, there were ad hoc contributions in the years that you see on your screen. And Council did defer annual contributions in 2023 and 2024 on the water and the sewer utilities. So what does this asset management commitment look like in actual dollars? So the table on the screen shows us not only how compounding has helped district reserve levels, but it also illustrates how Council's commitment has been shaping our reserves over the years. Organizationally, Council has nearly quadrupled the amount of funds allocated to utility reserves over this 6-year span, and in total will have allocated $9 million into reserves over this period. Now, this is a huge step in the district's overall asset management journey, and the effects of this decision will be discussed further when we look at each of the individual 5-year capital plans later on in today's presentation. Now, I wanted to highlight 2 items on this page before we move on, and I touched on one of them briefly. So firstly, in 2023 and 24, the annual 5% water and 3.5% sewer allocations were deferred, in part due to the discontinuation of the early payment discount, as well as unprecedented inflationary cost pressures that we were seeing. Secondly, for 2025, Council has earmarked rate increases of 4% in water, 2% in sewer, and 1% in the electric utility, specifically for asset management contributions. This translates into dollar values of $180,264 in water, $35,224 in sewer, and $151,685 in the electric utility. So in total, Council is proposing to add $367,000 in new asset management funding in this 2025 budget. The first utility that we will look at today is also the largest in terms of its operational budget size, the electric utility. Now, the District of Summerland is one of 5 municipalities in BC that operates its own electrical utility. We purchase wholesale power from Fortis and sell it to our residents. Some of the services or cost centers associated with the electric utility are noted on your screen. Administration has a budget of $1.35 million. The electric power, or the power we buy from Fortis, $11.38 million. System operations has a budget of $1.8 million. Brushing is $53,000. Our meter maintenance and reading program is $341,000. Underground locates is $45,000. Our solar and BESS maintenance, $55,000. Transfers to capital reserves, which we'll be talking about a lot today, $1.2 million. And a dividend to the general fund of $500,000. So in all, the 2025 budget for these services is proposed at $16.8 million, with, of course, the largest amount being the $11.4 million that's paid to Fortis BC for power. Overall, operational expenses in the electric utility have increased 4%, or $585,000 over last year's budget. And as is the case every year, the major driving force behind this increase is Fortis BC's wholesale power costs. The district has budgeted for a 5.3% Fortis increase, which, based on estimated consumption, increases our wholesale power costs by $433,623. Now, on the last slide, we touched on the major driving force behind this year's budget increase, Fortis. This slide provides more details on some of the other factors that make up the rest of the budget changes. The first item to note is insurance premiums. Our premiums have increased $41,000 over last year. As the district's inventory was recently reevaluated by an insurer and was found that we were significantly underinsured in this area. The second item of note is that the proposed budget includes the addition of a new utility clerk. The district has seen significant growth in our utilities over the past 10 to 15 years. We have implemented new programs such as net metering, agricultural and domestic water billing, and a curbside collection program, just to name a few. We have seen a significant increase in renter movement as well as new development, all of which require people to ensure the entire process is being done correctly, but also to ensure customer inquiries are being addressed. We're at the point where an additional utility clerk is needed to ensure residents continue to receive the excellent customer service they're accustomed to getting. As this position deals with all three utilities, the overall cost has been distributed amongst all three of the utilities. Now, as a significant portion of the work being performed during the training process will be focused on the electric utility, 70% of the position, or the 56,000 you see on your screen, has been allocated to the electric utility. The remaining 30% has been allocated evenly between the water and sewer utilities, as well as the curbside collection program. And you'll see those as we move along. The third item to note is pole yard security. Outside of poles, we store transformers at the pole yard, and we recently fell victim to significant vandalism and theft at this location. This budgeted funding is to implement a security solution at this location to ensure this doesn't occur in the future. The next item to note is contractual operational increases. The district has several contractual obligations that we have entered into over different lengths of time, all of which have built-in contractual increases. These contractual increases include union and employment agreements, janitorial servicing agreements, and an engineering and consulting agreements, just to name a few. The cumulative increase of these agreements on the 2025 budget equates to approximately $49,000. And the final item to note, which we've touched on already, is an increase to asset management contributions. The proposed budget includes a 1% rate increase specific for asset management contributions, which works out to an increase of $151,685. The district's proposed 2025 capital plan consists of 9 capital projects totaling $2.7 million, with the Wharton Underground project, which is budgeted at $1.5 million in 2025, accounting for 55% of the entire capital program. I'd like to now pass the presentation over to Jeremy Storvald, Director of Utilities, to provide some more information on the individual projects themselves. Jeremy?
Thank you, Dave. Am I coming through okay?
You are.
Great. Thanks, Dave, for your hard work on the utility budgets this year. I'll just start at the top. So we'll talk about the radio and repeater system replacement. This is to upgrade our District of Summerland staff handheld radio system. So this is the electric utility portion of that. The fiber system upgrades project is to continue expansion of our fiber communications network. The Parkdale offsite improvements is to supply electrical service to the Parkdale housing development, currently on the books. We have service connections and capacity upgrades. This is for when we need to upgrade the power system capacity to connect new customers. We have our James Avenue property upgrades, which is for improvements needed for the property that the district owns on James Avenue in order for the electric utility to store equipment there, mostly fencing upgrades. And then, of course, the Wharton Street upgrades, just like the name suggests, is to provide underground power along Wharton Street, and that's to move those power lines underground there. That's our biggest project. Kelly Wharton Brown streetlight upgrades. This is to finish installation in that area of the downtown, which has been a project that's been on hold for some time now. But now that the Wharton project is designed, we know which streetlights we're installing. We're now ready to install those. So that's for 2025. And then we have pole replacements, which is part of our annual pole replacement project. And that's to replace power poles, wooden power poles that are end of life. Over to you, Dave.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeremy. So the proposed 5-year capital plan, which it can be found on the district's website, shows that electrical projects are expensive and they range into the millions of dollars. However, with council's commitment over the years of increasing reserve contributions, including the proposed 2025 contribution of 1%, I'm happy to note that the proposed 5-year capital plan is fully funded and does not include any proposed borrowing over this 5-year term. This slide shows projected reserve and surplus levels over the next 5 years based on the proposed capital plan. And as I just noted on the previous slide, the entire 5-year financial plan is funded without the requirement of utilizing any debt. The second utility that we will look at today is wastewater, or more commonly known as the sewer utility. The sewer utility's primary cost centers, noted on the screen: administration, which has a budget of $475,000, sewage collection and treatment, $1 million, the Sani station, $10,000, lift station maintenance is $102,000 budgeted, sludge removal $359,000, preventative maintenance is $30,000, the capital reserve transfers $521,000, and debt charges are $365,000. So in total, the 2025 budget for these services is proposed at $2.93 million. When we look at sewer revenue, the majority of the revenue being collected, 91% of it, is coming from user fees and parcel taxes. In total, $2.66 million. Now, this is very common in utilities whose primary revenue source are the fees that users pay. On the expense side, sewer expenses have increased 6.22%, or $171,440 over the prior year. Now, the largest contributing factor, and the mayor or deputy mayor touched on it, to this increase relates to the new debt payments coming online in 2025 for the construction of a primary clarifier. This project received electoral approval in 2024, and annual debt payments of $90,751 are to be recovered through a rate increase. Therefore, of the proposed 8.08% rate increase in this budget, 5.15% is attributed to these new debt payments. 2% is attributed to increased asset management contributions, and less than 1%, 0.93% to be precise, is attributed to operational increases. So as I touched on the last slide, the largest contributing factor to the increased expenditures is due to the new debt payments of $90,751 coming online for the construction of a primary clarifier. The remaining factors include the new utility clerk, which we touched on during our discussion in the electrical utility. The sewer utilities portion is 10%, or $7,655. The next item to note is the contractual operational increases. Just like the electric utility, the district has several contractual obligations that we have entered into over different lengths of time, and the sewer utility as well. These contracts include employment agreements and union contracts, janitorial, and engineering consulting agreements. The cumulative increase of these agreements on the 2025 budget equates to $30,000. And the final item to note, which we've touched on, is an increase to asset management contributions. The proposed budget includes a 2% rate increase specific for asset management contributions, which works out to an increase of $35,224. Our proposed 2025 capital plan consists of 9 capital projects totaling $6 million. Two of these projects, the primary clarifier and connecting community sewer expansion, which is the Deer Ridge sewer expansion, make up 72% or $4.3 million of this plan. Now, in terms of the actual projects themselves, I'll pass again on to Jeremy to speak to them. Jeremy?
Thank you, Dave. So starting again at the top, we'll talk about the primary clarifier. That's for construction of and continuation of the project to increase capacity at the wastewater treatment plant. The filter building renovation is to complete the changes to the filter building to allow for storage in that building. Again, Parkdale offsite improvements is to provide the sewer service to that new development. Connecting community sewer expansion is for sewer expansion to the Deer Ridge area. Treatment plant pump replacements and upgrades is to continue and complete that project, which started in 2024. And that's just to do rebuilds and pump replacements at the wastewater treatment plant. The Headworks fine screen spare is an important project at the wastewater treatment plant, and it's to refurbish the existing fine screen system. That's the first step in the treatment process at the wastewater treatment plant. And then treatment plant capacity and renewal upgrades is to continue working on design for our wastewater plant to increase capacity there. And then finally, the sludge bin is to replace one of our existing sludge bins with a larger one at the wastewater treatment plant. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Jeremy. So again, as we can see from the proposed 5-year capital plan, just like the electric utility, sewer projects are expensive. And although council has made concerted efforts over the years in allocating additional funds into sewer capital reserves, in order to move some of the identified projects forward, borrowing is required. So overall, the proposed capital plan includes one project budgeted to cost $4.8 million that requires debt financing, the bioreactor. Now, during council deliberations, this project was originally budgeted to be constructed in 2027. However, council put forth a motion to delay construction by 1 year, and that motion passed. So as such, the project is now budgeted to be constructed in 2028, which means the required public assent process will be initiated around the third quarter of 2027. Should electoral approval be received, estimated annual debt payments will be $390,313, which would require a rate increase of approximately 22% and would cost the typical household approximately $97.65. The actual borrowing would occur in the fall of 2028, with the debt payments and subsequent rate increases occurring in 2029. Now, to be clear on this, these amounts have been calculated based on current market pricing and interest rates, and would need to be adjusted for market conditions closer to the actual construction window. So this slide shows the projected reserve and surplus levels over the next 5 years based on this proposed plan. And I would like to take a minute to show the benefits of annually making asset management reserve contributions, as there are some people who question the rationale of putting money aside now for future capital investment. So going back to our bioreactor example, we looked at a few slides ago, should council utilize the projected reserves available to them in 2028, borrowing for this project could be lowered by $3.1 million. This would lower the annual debt payments by $268,000 down to $122,318. This would also lower the rate increase required to cover those debt payments from 22% to a much more manageable 6.95%. And it would lower the approximate annual increase to the typical home by $67.03 down to $30.62. So by using these reserve funds, projected interest payments over the 25-year borrowing go from $3.8 million down to $1.3 million. That's $2.5 million in interest ratepayers will not have to pay due to council's annual commitment to asset management. Our final utility today that we'll be discussing is the water utility. The water utility's primary cost centers include administration, which is budgeted at $774,000, treatment, which is $2.2 million, distribution, $1.4 million, dam maintenance, $193,000, hydrant maintenance is $122,000. Our debt charges are $1.82 million. Capital reserve transfers are $1.23 million. Meter maintenance, $414,000, and preventative maintenance of $40,000. So in all, the 2025 budget for these services is proposed at $8.1 million. Just like our other two budgets, the proposed water utility budget is a baseline budget. The budget considers contractual increases, third-party rate increases, as well as operational projects approved by council. When we look at revenue, the majority of the revenue being collected, 88.2%, is coming from user fees and parcel taxes, which equate to $7.2 million. And like the sewer utility, this is very common in utilities whose primary revenue sources are the fees that users pay. Overall, 2025 budgeted water expenses are projected to increase 5.58%, or $430,400. The two largest factors that make up this increase are the asset management contributions of $180,264 and increased chemical and coagulant costs of $110,000. These two items make up 67% of the overall increase in this budget. So the first two items that we've talked about already, the asset management contributions of $180,000 and the chemicals and coagulants of $110,000. The other two items on this screen we have touched on in the other utilities as well. The new utility clerk allocation to the water utility is 10%, or $7,655. And just like the sewer and electric utilities, our contractual increases related to janitorial servicing, engineering consulting, and union and employment agreements equate to an increase of $84,000. The district's proposed 2025 capital plan consists of 20 capital projects totaling $5.9 million. Two of these projects, the completion of Victoria Road system separation and Eisentalk Dam spillway construction, make up 62%, or $3.6 million of the plan. And in terms of the projects themselves, I'll now pass it one more time over to Mr. Storvald to speak to the individual projects. Jeremy?
Thank you, Dave. Again, starting at the top here, lots of projects here in water. Eisentalk, that is to complete our spillway widening project at Eisentalk. We actually expect that to be mostly completed in 2024. But if there is anything that's remaining, we'll have that money carried forward into 2025. That's a dam safety requirement. We have Thirsk dam safety improvements. Just as the name suggests, this is to address items identified in our dam safety review for Thirsk. And then we have Headwaters and Garnet dam safety improvements. And again, this is further dam safety review items, and we'll be starting on our design work for those two areas. Then we have two water main projects here on Prairie Valley and Victoria Road. After that, the lamella block replacement. This component is part of the water treatment plant and is original from the construction of the plant, and we'll be replacing that. This is the second phase of this project. Then we have PRVs. This is the complete work on one of our pressure reducing stations. Then water treatment plant pump replacements, again, started in 2024, and any funds we have left will carry into 2025 to complete that work, and that's just to refurbish and replace pumps in the water treatment plant. Then we have the water treatment plant controls upgrades. This is to finalize design for our control system at the water treatment plant and provide estimates for future years. We have then our source water protection plan, which we've done work on in 2024, including a work plan. And we'll continue that work now into 2025 to complete that project. Then we have cathodic protection. This is a project that replaces material that we actually put in the ground near our steel pipes, and it's to prevent corrosion in those pipes. And then finally, we have our Parkdale housing project, and this is to provide water service to that development. Thanks, Dave.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeremy. So the slide in front of everyone summarizes the district's proposed 5-year water capital plan and highlights the need for continued asset management investment. As the slide shows, water projects are extremely expensive and range into the millions of dollars. Now, although council has made concerted efforts over the years in allocating additional funds into water capital reserves, in order to move some of the identified projects forward, significant grant funding and borrowing is required. Overall, the proposed capital plan includes 4 identified projects, excuse me, totaling $5.6 million in borrowing over the next 5 years. Now, the larger concern and the driving force behind continued asset management allocation increases is the fact that 81.7% of the proposed 5-year plan requires funding from external sources. This puts a lot of the projects at risk of not moving forward, as we'll be relying on third-party adjudicators who will be reviewing grant applications in oversubscribed funding programs. Without increased reserve contributions, we may find ourselves at the mercy of these adjudicators, and if unsuccessful in grant applications, our only other avenue to get projects completed will be debt. Therefore, to try to lower the reliance on debt and grant funding, Council is proposing to increase 2025 asset management contributions equivalent to a 4% rate increase, which will increase annual reserve contributions by $180,264. Now, based on the proposed 5-year capital plan and the proposed asset management contributions, the reserve levels in the water utility are projected at the amounts noted on the screen before you. So what does all of this mean to you, the residents of Summerland? The proposed water rate increase of 7%, which would be effective January 1st, combined with an additional 1% increase on September 1st, equates to a $5.97 per month increase in water rates. On the sewer side, the proposed 8.08% is equivalent to a $2.97 per month increase. And on the electric side, a 5.66 increase equates to $8.31 per month. Annualized, $17.25 a month, or $207 a year. So this concludes the District of Summerland's virtual 2025 utility budget and rates open house. We thank everyone who attended and ask that any written comments be emailed to the email on your screen, budget@summerland.ca. And as the Deputy Mayor noted in her opening remarks, to ensure these comments are provided to Council prior to finalizing any rate increases, we ask that all submissions be emailed by December 5th at 5 p.m. I will now open things up for questions, if there are any. We just ask you to unmute yourself and state your name and ask your question, please.
Okay, this is Marianne McDonald. You know who I am.
I know you, Marianne.
Hello, David. So already, okay, I'm looking at your 2025 sewer increase, and your figure and my figures don't add up. I'm currently paying $36.72 a month, but you said that the rate would go up to $35.60 for next year. I'm already paying over that, and yet my total for the year is $446, and you're proposing it to go up to $476. So those are two things that I'm just a little curious about. The second thing is the $200 sewer parcel that council approved for the an additional 4 years.
Mhm.
It's rather vague as to where that is going because the original one, when we established the sewer back in 1999, the sewer parcel tax was to be 200 a year. So are you planning on increasing that yet again in January over and above this $200? It's a little confusing as to how you were planning on doing that.
So in terms of your first question about the utility rates and what your bill is comparatively speaking, so I don't have your account information in front of me. So maybe tomorrow you can give us a call and we can look at your account. But what we have on the screen, I will just go back a slide
Please.
here. So this is the typical residential home in Summerland. So in 2024, it was the 441 and the 476. So again, not having your bill in front of me, I don't want to put the wrong words out there. So I'd ask maybe you give us a call tomorrow and we can have a look in more detail in terms of your account.
Okay.
Regarding the parcel tax, so in terms of levers that we can utilize in collecting revenue in utilities, a parcel tax is one, and of course rates are another. So in the proposed budget we have here, only the rates are being proposed to increase, so not the parcel tax. So the parcel tax will remain at the $200. You were correct. The council did implement an increase, or sorry, a reestablishment of that parcel tax last year for a 4-year period, which was going to give staff some time to kind of look at the overall sewer utility and how revenues are collected and how revenues are billed, and would provide us that chance to look at other communities to make sure that we're doing things correctly and appropriately. So that 4%, that 4-year $200 parcel tax will not be increasing by 8%.
That's good to hear. That would have been very, very annoying if you had.
No,
Thank you.
it's just the rates, Marianne.
I know. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions? Please just unmute yourself and state your name.
I have one other question. Sorry, and it has
Sorry,
to be.
it's a one question per person, Marianne.
All right. Yeah, right. Okay. So
Go ahead.
the solar, you talked about the solar costs are 55,000 a year. What is the revenue that is generated by it? Because as you know, I've not been a proponent of it, and I felt that it was costly to begin with. But is it generating enough to? You say it's costing right now 55,000 a year. So, what is it generating on the other side to maybe offset those costs?
Jeremy, are you around? Are you able to answer this more eloquently?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no problem. That's a great question, Marianne. So we are currently tracking the solar generation and how the batteries are peak shaving. So there's 2 systems on that site. And for the solar generation, we'll be providing a report to council in the spring on that. So we'll have the details there. We do need to kind of get through a full year to see how it went. And then for the peak shaving, same thing. And for peak shaving, we do rely on our wholesale power that we buy. We're basically Fortis to give us some of the numbers on our overall usage to calculate that. So those numbers will all be coming in April timeframe to council, so they can have a look at what we've done in the first year of having that site. So sorry, I don't have a number for you right now. But we'll need to wait till the year is over to get all that information.
Okay, that's fine. The other part of that as well is it connected to the electrical grid at this point in time, or is it just servicing that area? Because when you originally were proposing or when it was coming in, part of the problem was that you didn't have, I think it was a three-phase or tri-phase hookup into the system. Am I correct on that?
Um, not exactly, Marianne. So the power generation that occurs there and the usage and the export from the battery system, that's all connected to the grid. So it has three-phase power, and that's a requirement for that system to function. And that was something we needed to bring into site. So it was existing along Prairie Valley Road, and we brought it up into that solar site with a few poles. And so there was no issue there. Uh, and so now that that system's connected, it's interconnected. This was done in 2023, at the end of 2023. It's interconnected to the grid. It doesn't just feed the Deer Ridge area or the local area. It's actually connected to the North American grid. And so the analogy I use is that that generation that we have there is sort of goes into the punch bowl, and so does the Fortis generation that goes into the punch bowl, and BC Hydro and all of the little generating folks in town that have solar on their roofs, and that all sort of goes into the punch bowl. And when you use electricity, you sort of dip out of the punch bowl, so you get a little bit of everything because it's all sort of connected to one giant machine, and that's the North American grid. Hope that helps.
Thank you.
Hello, David. It's Karsten Nielsen here. Just wanted to ask you a quick question. As far as all your rate increases, is that going to be basically the same for residential, commercial, and those types, or is there going to be any changes to any of the other ones?
Great question, Karsten. So the rate increases are uniform. They affect every rate class. So all of the water rate users doesn't matter if you're agricultural or domestic or commercial, they'd all see those increases. Same with sewer, same with the electric. They're all across the board.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, this is Amy Harbor.
Hey, Amy.
Hi. I have a question. It was mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation that cuts and savings were considered. And I'm wondering if you can cover some of the cuts and savings measures that were considered or have been made in an attempt to balance the budget.
Well, I don't have an extensive list per se on me right now. How best to answer this question? I'll tell you the process we go through, and then once I go through that process, I'll probably be able to provide you with probably more concrete information through an email. But basically the process that we go through here is the directors and the managers in August provide me, the director of finance, with their budget asks for the year. So my job is to basically go through, put everything into my lovely spreadsheets, and normally the rate increases at that point in time are quite substantial. The asks are usually very high. And then it's a matter of we have conversations with each of the directors. We go back and forth. We look at all kinds of different things. We remove things from their budgets that they've asked for. Things get pulled, things get cut. Again, sorry, I don't have a list of all of those things that were cut. I'd actually have to go back to their original submissions that they sent back in August and compare those lists to what I have now. And it's something I could definitely do for you. I don't have that list on me at the moment. So if I could, if it works for you and I could get your email address, I could send you something probably tomorrow or the day after, if that works.
Okay, yeah, that's okay. Yeah, because I guess what I'm wondering is if a balanced, like aside from the asset reserve funding, if a balanced budget was offered as an alternative to a budget that requires an increase in costs. Something that council could look at, like this balances it, so there's no increase needed compared to this is what you get by raising everyone's rates.
Yeah. So we always try to maintain that balance. As you're aware, I think it's affecting everybody right now. We are in a time where our costs are increasing just like everyone else's. So when we propose baseline budgets, which are basically budgets that have really no increases in them in terms of projects, those types of things. We do ask council to look at specific projects here and there, but when you look, for instance, in our water utility, right? We're buying the same amount of chemicals to treat our water, but those chemicals have now gone up $110,000 compared to last year. So we're not increasing any levels of service. We're not increasing anything. Our costs have gone up. So we try extremely hard to look at other areas within our budgets to reduce costs so that those effects aren't have to be borne by everyone. And
yeah, that's what I'm looking for, is those areas that you looked at.
Yeah, so
to reduce costs.
I can put something together for you, like I say, in the next day or so, and send you an email if that works. Again, I don't have that on me at the moment, but can you give me your email, please?
Okay, it's amyharbor@gmail.com. So that's AMIEHARBOR@gmail.com.
At gmail.com. Perfect. I will put something together for you, Amy.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
I do have another question, if that's okay.
Sure.
It was mentioned the Deer Ridge expansion. I think that's in the sewer.
Mhm.
Is that the Eco Village?
Jeremy, you want to take that one? It's not the Eco Village per se.
Sure, Dave, thanks. Yeah, this is to expand sewer in that direction. So we don't at this time know exactly where that sewer line is going to end up. So this is a placeholder for when we determine that. So in this last year, 2024, we went through a process with council on expanding sewer to the Deer Ridge area, and so that project is currently under review. And so we in our budget we just have a placeholder here, and so it may not be for Deer Ridge, it may just be for that Eco Village area, or it may be for nothing. At this point, we're just investigating that, and we'll be back in council chambers to discuss that with council and receive direction from them on that.
So is that related to the alternative approval process that was rejected?
Yes, it is, and no, it isn't. That project has been rejected, and so it's no longer being pursued per se. And so, but we do need a budget sort of placeholder in order to continue that discussion with council and see where they want to go with any expansion at all in that direction with our sewer utility.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. If there are no other questions, we'll give you another 30, 20 seconds, maybe 10 seconds. And if we don't hear from anyone, again, I'd like to thank everyone for attending. And as on the screen here, if there are any written submissions, any comments that you would like to make, so that council can see, please send them to the email on the screen, budget@summerland.ca, and we'll ensure that they are passed on and are part of the council discussion when we bring the rates forward. So thank you and have a lovely evening, everyone.
Thanks, David.